Hello, it's the Gnome again. Speaking of beginnings, with part 2 of a 3-part series. This is called Dead Roach and Whistling Water. For most grown-up anglers, the glimpse of a dead fish is seldom a cause for celebration. It is instead a reason for despair. However, when I was a child, a small dead roach, the curved flank just breaking surface, would stir me like a calling card from a silvery, arcane world. Not that dead fish were out of reach for very long, for I and my friends would make use of sticks, reeds, and even well-placed earth bombs causing ripples to bring those little treasures to hand. Long before we could hope to hook such glittering prizes, we came in this way to appreciate the colours and forms of fish. And to see just one, even a small dead roach, was a promise that reality could sometimes be amazing. So, we were the haunters of canal locks, run-offs, and weirs where the sound of running water was a living thing, a spirit presence that often released its dead on hands of foam or weed. Yes, these were sinister and dangerous places, but that merely added to the thrill of our quest. I recall crossing a canal lock with my father and staring down into the green, uneasy oblong of pungent water so far below us. I must have been 5 or 6. "There's a dead perch," he said, and pointed out a nice specimen of about 1 pound. Its sharp dorsal comb was still raised defiantly, despite the whitish film over its eye. Lock sides are usually dark green, with the kind of soft slimy weed that offers no purchase to desperate clutching fingers. Suddenly I was afraid, hearing the urgent clamour of water as the lock began to fill, and we paused on its old wooden gates, one slip away from disaster. This was a threshold dividing, so it seemed, life from death. The perch, barred with darkness, was floating on a darkness I could not fathom, and that frightened me while I gazed down from the summer light, my father beside me. But more than that, I sensed perhaps for the first time the lock's otherness, and the idea that water, which could take a life so easily, was also very much alive. This concept was to strike me most forcibly when I visited the Roman spa at Bath as a young man in my 20s. Beneath the celebrated bath were the underground remnants of a vast ancient complex, where rivulets would spill into sacred wells and where, in the subdued light and soft spray, vivid green ferns were thriving. These echoing spaces were in ruin, and nail-deep mosses covered jumbled stones. But the old power still remained. A sense that the god or goddess once worshipped by the Romano Celts was still potent in the steamy atmosphere. Close to those brimming man-made pools, something was still counting the coins as the ripples settled. And it pondered on each plea for better luck. Anglers understand this common trick. I've often thrown a coin into a river or a pond to pay for a better day. Sometimes it seems to work. Or is that down to a boost in confidence? Confidence is so important, isn't it? For several years, despite regular trips with my brother David, I found it impossible to catch so much as a gudgeon. The truth was, I did not believe that fishing was possible. It all seemed so incredible. Of course my brother would catch gudgeon by the score, while I would blank, but that was because different rules applied to him, for he had paid his dues. His mind could cross from the canal bank to the settled darkness and back again. He moved between two worlds with the same studious expression on his face. But I can clearly recall the day when the magic finally found me and I caught a living roach. In fact, I caught two. It was the close of winter and I was 12. Our spot forever afterwards would be called the Roach Place or the Roach Bend, in honour of that occasion. It was no more than a widening along the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal, but there was a channel on the far bank that joined the canal to a rectangular, steep-sided pool. I expect the pool was built as a canal reservoir for times of drought or low levels. Now, it was the main garden feature of a big house, and its owners had put a tall wooden fence up on both sides of the channel to obscure the view of common anglers and passing barges. We liked the fence, my brother and I, because the noise of the rain on the canal would echo off its thin wooden slats and create a curious whistling sound. It added to the mystery. And on the day of the Roach it was raining, and the Roach Bend was indeed whistling to itself as quietly as the rain was soft. It was not a chilly day, but I sat with a woolen Aston Villa hat on my head, listening to the subtle notes from the raindrops and feeling a change in the atmosphere. Spring seemed far away, the trees were bare, the bankside ferns were brown and shriveled, and fallen leaves, equally brown and shriveled, remained on the path from the autumn. I was using a Japanese sunfish split cane combination rod. If one reversed the handle, it became a light fly rod with a test curve of 8 ounces or so. My float was a chunky Pegley Davis Avon Trotter. It had a segmented cork body, which always made me think of a cigar, and a bright orange top to inform me of another fruitless day. I was there as the youngest to make up the numbers. I expect that I drove my brother and his fishing friend Nigel to distraction at times with my singing and aimless chatter. But then I was quiet. The mood had indeed altered, and out there beneath the drifting twigs and leaves, and masked by a dark green shimmer, a judgmental instinct was about to accept my offering. The float bobbed once, then vanished, and I struck as I had been instructed. I was astonished by the rod's half-circle. Something was juddering and jagging at the end of my line, and what else could I do but reel and reel? The playing of any fish was beyond me in those days. The cheap intrepid boyo reel seized up under such harsh treatment. But it didn't matter, really, because I was able to swing out the half-pound roach, for that is what it was, into my brother's waiting hands. Winter's cold had darkened its fins to deepest scarlet, and its scale-perfect silver was only matched by the warming orange of a downturned eye. The three of us surrounded the fish, the first living roach I had seen on the bank, and the measure of every roach to come. My brother slipped it back, quickly and efficiently. The day had been enough for us, but more was to follow. Just when I was feeling smug and guilty, in a schoolboyish way, that glory had been mine alone, the float disappeared once more. It was a 4-ounce roach, like a half-sized copy of the first, but just as lovely. The light began to fade, and a nippy breeze rifled through the leaf drifts. It was at once a slightly eerie spot. We were to hear, much later on, during the time when my brother fished the Roach Bend for its large carp, that the bend had a resident ghost, a white lady, in fact. But if a spectre still walks that tree-shadowed towpath, I would like to think she is merely the genial spirit of that spot, akin to the nymphs that were worshipped by the Romans by wells and rivulets, where water was alive and sometimes spoke. My brother's cane match rod is bending, and his fine line is slowly slowly cutting through the dark placid surface and the dead floating leaves. Soon he's admiring a magnificent roach, perhaps 12 ounces or more, and the deepening shade is nothing to its brightness. There will be other memorable catches in time on other days, but none perhaps as perfect as that afternoon in March, so long ago, when we were blessed indeed.